and we'll roll the old chariot along, we'll roll the old chariot along, we'll roll the old chariot along, and we'll all hang on behind. From a child, I had so much of my own will that it was a difficult matter to keep me within proper bounds. My father and mother were poor, and they worked hard for their bread. There were 9 of us, and being the eldest and a maid, it was down to me to take care of the younger ones. I did not take well to the restrictions of a nursemaid, and being of a roving nature, I never did like being indoors. So, when my absences were discovered, my mother would beat me in such a manner that the neighbours thought she would kill me. But after my crying was done, I was out the door again and up to my old tricks with my playfellas. I had 2 brothers who were sailors and gone to sea those last 2 years. And though a maid, I always dreamed of sailing the far seas and seeing fresh horizons. So, at the age of 14, I conspired to follow my inclinations and my brother's example and go to sea myself. Well, but how? Well, I was no strapping lad, but a maid in petticoats. Then, an idea came into my head that I should dress myself in men's apparel and go away myself. So, I took my father's old shirts and a pair of breeches left behind by my brothers, them being too small for my brothers and yet too large for the younger ones. And one morning, I set off. The sun rose fair as I left the village as far behind as I could. Then I pulled off my clothes and put on shirt and breeches, and I put my petticoat and all deep in the hedge. And thus, attired in the habit of a man, I hitched a ride on a cart going to Hull. It was dark when we arrived, and I walked about for some time. All was new and strange to me. And having nowhere to lay my head and no money to buy food, I resolved to find some barn or shed to lay me down in. So I found a barn, and I lay down in the straw next to a pen of pigs. When it came to morning, I set myself up, shook myself down, and I left the barn making sure nobody saw me. Oh, but I was mighty hungry. Walking along the wharf, I saw some men belonging to a collier ship attached to the wharf below. And so they gave me victuals and some drink with them. And it was at this time a gentleman came to where we were and asked if I would go to sea, and that he would find me a fine master aboard the Charlotte. Well, I said, yes, sir. At that time, I had no idea that the Charlotte was a 90-gun ship of the line, a newly launched vessel in need of crew. And so I got aboard my first ship, but it would not be the last, where I stood on the decks and had my name listed in the muster books. That first night on board, I was provided with a bed of sorts, a hammock, and given a hand to sling it up. But when I attempted to get into my new bed that night, I got in one side and then straight out the other, which made all my seamates laugh at me. Oh. In all my time on the Charlotte, I acquitted myself well, and as time passed, I learnt to perform the various duties of any sailor. Scrubbing and holy stone in the decks, pumping the ship, incessant hard toil that. Plucking oakum, climbing aloft, clambering the rigging to reef in a sail in stormy weather, pulling on heavy ropes and taking my turn at the capstan with my crewmates to heave the anchor. My early life climbing apple trees to take the fruit, or to escape the wrath of the farmer, put me in good stead to perform the most arduous of tasks, and I was always first to mount the rigging. I clambered up in stormy days and tempestuous nights, and never once did I show the slightest symptom of fear. Indeed, I was as good as any man. I took my grog with my messmates with the greatest of gaiety. I learnt to smoke furiously, indulge at quids, and swear with a tolerable grace. And I acquired the rolling gait and a bellowing voice of a sailor. Oh, some rum, beer and baccy wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, some rum, beer and baccy wouldn't do us any harm. Some rum, beer and baccy wouldn't do us any harm, and we'll all hang on behind. I was in every inch a sailor. For all to see, I was a man. There was never any occasion when I would change my clothes, for we slept in what we stood up in. The only time a sailor stripped was when he was to be flogged, and I had no intention to be flogged. With so many men living in such close quarters, each man kept to himself, so I contrived to wash myself without arousing any suspicion. And when the need took me, I would take myself to the heads when no one else was there. In all my years at sea, I never shirked in my duties, even in the foulest of weather. One time, when I was serving aboard the Neptune, it seemed ill luck had lighted upon us. Oh, the wind came to blow worse and worse, and the great boisterous seas rose above us. It was thick and dark as night could make it. The mainsail was flapping and slatting with a noise like thunder, and the captain came on deck and ordered it furled. So, accordingly, we all climbed the rigging through the snow and the hail. The yard we lay on was all encased in ice, and the sail and the rope hard and stiff with it. It blew a full gale all the while we were aloft, and we were forced to fist the sail in with our bare hands. Well, no one could trust his grip to mittens, for if he slipped, he was a gone man. We had need of every finger God had given us. Well, several times we had the sail upon the yard, but the wind would blow it away before we had time to tie it. Oh, we were obliged to leave off and beat our hands upon the sail to keep them from freezing. At length, all was made fast, but we had been up on that yard 1 hour and a half. Oh, it felt like an age. Oh, but worse than this hardship was to hear the cry when you were at sea of, "Ahoy, all hands! A man overboard!" And this is what happened when we were serving on the Royal William. One morning, it being our watch below, we were roused from a sound sleep by the shout, "Ahoy, all hands, a man overboard!" And this cry sent a chill through everyone's heart. We got on deck and saw that the vessel was hove to, and the watch on deck were lowering a boat over the side, and I managed to heave myself on board before she hit the water. It was only when we were out on the wild Atlantic in this small boat that I learnt who we had lost. It was a young fellow, an active and an able seaman, lively and hearty, a good shipmate. He'd been aloft to fit a strap to the main topmast head, and he had about his neck the strap and a block, a coil of halyards and a heavy marline spike. He fell from the starboard shroud futtocks, and what with that all about his neck, and not knowing how to swim and being in heavy clothes, 'twas like he sank immediately. We pulled the boat astern in the direction he fell. And although we knew there was no hope of saving him, none could think of saying to return. We rowed about for about an hour, knowing full well we would not find him, but not want to acknowledge we were obliged to let him go. After some time, we turned the boat and headed for the vessel. We'd be all right if we make it round the Horn. We'd be all right if we make it round the Horn. We'd be all right if we'd make it round the Horn, and we'd all hang on behind. I served at sea 9 years before my sex was discovered. I learnt all the niceties of my trade. But after 9 years and serving under as many masters, I was discovered, and would not have been if I had not had fallen overboard and like to have been devoured by sharks, had not my seamate pulled a boat in and hauled me up. When I was taken up, I was stripped to put me to bed, and that was when it was discovered I was of the fair sex, and not a Jack, but Jane. Ah. Oh, a damn good flogging wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, a damn good flogging wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, a damn good flogging wouldn't do us any time, and we'd all hang on behind.